Robert Kiyosaki, the author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, argues that the science of earning money is something schools never teach. Instead, schools train us to become employees, build careers, and seek job security, not wealth. If you come from a middle-class background, like Kiyosaki did, chances are your parents taught you how to survive financially, not thrive. This isn't because they didn't care or lacked intelligence, it's because they themselves inherited outdated ideas about money. As Kiyosaki puts it, financial thinking is like genetics, beliefs about money are passed down through generations. Unfortunately, most people inherit a mindset that keeps them in the rat race. Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of those eye-opening finance books that many wish they had read in their teens. In it, Kiyosaki compares the advice he received from his two father figures, his biological father, the poor dad, and the father of his childhood friend Mike, the rich dad. These contrasting perspectives shaped Kiyosaki's approach to money, work, and life. Let's explore the first key lesson from the book: the rich don't work for money. When Kiyosaki was just 9 years old, he and Mike were invited to a wealthy classmate's beach house. This experience exposed their lower income status and sparked a desire in young Robert to become rich. Curious and determined, he went home and asked his father how to become wealthy. His father, an educated, hard-working schoolteacher, told him, "You have to learn how to make more money." Even at that age, Robert sensed that this advice wasn't enough. Sensing Robert's curiosity, his poor dad encouraged him to speak with Mike's dad. Oddly enough, Mike's dad wasn't rich yet, nor had he finished the 8th grade, but he owned several small businesses and had a sharp entrepreneurial mind. Robert and Mike visited him, eager to learn. Mike's dad, Kiyosaki's rich dad, agreed to teach them, but not through lectures or books. Instead, he offered them real-world experience. They would work for him in one of his stores for 10 cents an hour, 3 hours every Saturday. Despite having a softball game, Robert agreed. He knew this was his shot to learn something different. The job, however, was dull and tedious. Under the supervision of a woman named Mrs. Martin, they dusted shelves in a small, unair-conditioned convenience store, restocking items like milk and bread as cars stirred up dust from the open road. After 3 weeks, Robert had had enough. He felt like a slave and had not even seen Rich Dad since the first day. Angry and discouraged, he told Mike he was quitting. Mike, unfazed, told Robert that his father expected this moment. It was all part of the plan. Rich Dad didn't believe in lectures, he used life to teach lessons. When Robert returned to speak with him, he was made to wait 45 minutes. When Rich Dad finally arrived, Robert accused him of breaking his promise and exploiting them. Calmly, Rich Dad replied, "Life is the best teacher. It doesn't talk, it pushes." Most people let life push them around. Some fight back, but usually against the wrong things: their boss, job, or spouse. Few learn to welcome life's pressure as a lesson. He explained that none of his 150 employees had ever asked to be taught about money. They only cared about jobs and paychecks. But when Mike told him he and Robert truly wanted to learn, he created a real-life simulation. He paid them poorly on purpose to provoke emotion, frustration, confusion, even anger, so they would begin to question the system. Robert told him it was unfair. Rich Dad smiled. That was exactly the point. He explained that most people, when frustrated with their wages, simply quit and look for a higher-paying job. But that's not a solution. That's just jumping from one trap to another. He wanted Robert to learn a deeper truth: don't work for money, make money work for you. Rich Dad then said something shocking. Since Robert still had the desire to learn, he would no longer pay him at all. If Robert wanted to get rich, he had to use his head. Confused and skeptical, Robert continued working for free alongside Mike. 3 weeks later, Rich Dad treated them to ice cream and asked what they had learned. They admitted they still didn't know. So he asked them to look around at Mrs. Martin, the customers, the people in the park. "Do their lives look exciting to you?" he asked. "They work all their lives for little money, chasing job security and clinging to the hope of a 3-week vacation. That's the rat race. To test their resolve, Rich Dad offered them $5 an hour, a huge raise. Their eyes widened, but they quickly composed themselves. They recognized the bait for what it was. They felt their temptation dissolve. Rich Dad nodded approvingly. Good. You don't have a price. Most people do. That's how fear and greed control them. Fear of being broke drives them to work. Greed makes them spend. That's the cycle. Mike asked if there was another way. Rich Dad said yes, but warned that very few take it. Mike pressed for a hint. Rich Dad smiled and said, "Start by telling the truth. Be honest about how you feel. But don't tell me. Tell yourself." This moment marked the beginning of Robert's financial awakening, not through lectures or textbooks, but through lived experience, emotional struggle, and raw honesty. It's a lesson that still resonates today. To escape the rat race, you must stop letting money control you, and start learning how to control it instead. Many people believe they are acting logically when it comes to money, but in truth, their emotions are in the driver's seat. Most individuals are controlled by a silent fear, the fear of not having enough money. Instead of confronting this fear directly, they let it dominate their decisions. Rather than pausing to ask themselves whether their choices make sense long-term, they react emotionally and work harder, hoping more money will calm the storm inside. But the fear never really goes away. In fact, money becomes the master of their emotions and eventually, their lives. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad explained that this emotional trap keeps people in the rat race. They don't realize they're governed not by logic but by two powerful forces, fear and desire. Fear makes people cling to jobs, scared of losing their income. Desire, on the other hand, makes them chase the next best thing, nicer clothes, bigger homes, better gadgets, believing these things will bring happiness. But the truth is, the happiness money brings is temporary. As soon as one desire is fulfilled, another emerges. Fear and desire form a cycle that keeps people chasing money without ever finding peace. Rich Dad warned that even being rich doesn't automatically solve this problem. In fact, the more money people have, the more terrified they become of losing it. This fear can intensify the anxiety they felt when they were poor. Instead of gaining freedom, they become trapped by a new fear, the fear of loss. In both poverty and wealth, people who let emotions guide them often miss the deeper truth, that emotional discipline, not more money, is the real key to financial freedom. Most people respond to fear by taking the path society promotes, get a job. But a job is only a temporary solution to a lifelong problem. The real issue is never addressed: how to think independently and not let emotions make decisions for us. That's why Rich Dad was impressed when Robert and Mike refused his tempting offer of higher pay. They resisted the emotional pull of more money and chose to think instead. Rich Dad saw this as a turning point. They were beginning to learn how to use their minds, to observe, think, and problem solve without being blinded by emotional urges. He told them to keep working for free. If they could detach from the need for a paycheck, they would begin to see opportunities others couldn't. He promised that once their minds were no longer fixated on survival, they'd start to think creatively. Use your brain, he told them. And soon, you'll find ways to make more money than I could ever pay you. Inspired by this challenge, Robert and Mike began observing the world around them differently. One day, they came up with a brilliant idea: a comic book library for neighborhood kids. They noticed that Mrs. Martin, the woman running the store, threw out old comic books regularly. Instead of letting them go to waste, the boys asked if they could take them. She agreed. They then turned Mike's basement into a comic book library. Kids paid 10 cents for 2 hours of unlimited reading. Since a single comic book cost 10 cents, this was a bargain, and business boomed. Mike's younger sister acted as librarian, earning $1 a week and free access to the comics. Robert and Mike, meanwhile, averaged $9.50 a week, without being present. Although the library eventually shut down due to a small fight among the kids, the lesson had been learned. They had made money work for them, even in their absence. This was the real beginning of their financial education. They had experienced what most adults never do: income generated without trading time for money. This experience prepared them for the next lesson: why financial literacy matters. When people ask Kiyosaki where his journey to wealth began, he always gives the same answer his rich dad gave him: if you want to be rich, you need to be financially literate. It's not about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep, and how well you grow it. Financial literacy starts with understanding some basic but vital concepts, and at the top of the list is knowing the difference between an asset and a liability. Accounting, while often considered dull or confusing, is the language of money. To make it easier, Rich Dad used diagrams and simple language to teach the boys. He explained that an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, while a liability is something that takes money out. This principle, though basic, is something many adults fail to grasp. That's because they've been misinformed, often by financial advisors, bankers, and society at large. People are taught to buy things like homes and cars thinking they're assets, when in reality, they're often liabilities because they constantly take money out of their pockets through payments, maintenance, or taxes. Kiyosaki uses a simple cash flow diagram to illustrate this. At the top is the income statement, which shows money coming in and going out, your income versus your expenses. Below is the balance sheet, which reflects your financial foundation by comparing assets and liabilities. Real assets, investments, rental properties, or businesses generate cash flow. Liabilities, like car loans, credit cards, or even an oversized mortgage, drain it. So the foundation of becoming rich isn't rooted in earning more, it's in learning to recognize and acquire assets while avoiding or minimizing liabilities. And that begins with mastering your emotions, understanding your fears and desires, and educating yourself financially. Only then can you break free from the rat race and truly build wealth that lasts. Let's take a closer look at how financial literacy, and specifically, understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, can shape your entire financial future. Imagine you own a house. If you live in it, it may feel like an asset, but from a cash flow standpoint, it's likely a liability. Why? Because it takes money out of your pocket each month through mortgage payments, taxes, maintenance, and insurance. But if you rent that same house out and it brings in more income than it costs to maintain, it becomes an asset. This is the key difference: assets put money in your pocket, liabilities take it out. This distinction is the cornerstone of financial intelligence. If your goal is to become wealthy, you need to focus on buying assets and avoiding liabilities. Most people, unfortunately, do the opposite. They think buying a bigger house or a fancy car makes them wealthy, but those are often liabilities. Even worse, when people face financial struggles, they think the solution is to earn more money. But more income alone isn't the answer. Without financial education, more money often just fuels more spending. That's why many lottery winners or heirs who receive large inheritances end up broke in a few short years. They receive a windfall, but instead of investing wisely, they simply increase their expenses, believing the money will never run out. Their financial IQ hasn't changed, and without that education, the money disappears. The missing ingredient is financial literacy, the ability to understand and manage money in a way that builds long-term wealth. Robert Kiyosaki points out that someone can be highly intelligent and still be financially illiterate. People might be skilled in their professions, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and earn impressive salaries, yet still struggle financially. They may be experts in their fields, but they've never learned how to make money work for them. They only know how to work for money. This is why so many people believe their home is their biggest asset. It's not. If it doesn't generate income, it's a liability. Kiyosaki doesn't say you shouldn't buy a home, he says you should first acquire income-generating assets that can pay for the house. That way, the expense doesn't come from your primary income, but from your investments. So, how do you know when you're wealthy? Kiyosaki offers a simple definition: wealth is the ability to survive a certain number of days forward without working. In other words, if you stopped working today, how long could you maintain your current lifestyle? That's your measure of wealth. It's not about how much money you make, it's about how much passive income your assets generate compared to your monthly expenses. Let's talk about minding your own business. Kiyosaki shares a story about Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. When asked what business he was in, people said, the hamburger business. But Kroc corrected them, he said he was in the real estate business. He understood that owning the land under each franchise was where the real value came from. Today, McDonald's is one of the largest real estate owners in the world. There's a big difference between your profession and your business. Your profession is what you do to earn money, maybe you're a teacher, a programmer, or a dentist. But your business is your asset column. It's where your investments live. Minding your own business means growing your assets, even while working a job. That's why Kiyosaki encourages people to keep their day job but start building their asset base on the side. Buy income-producing assets. Keep your expenses low. Avoid consumer debt. Your business isn't your job, it's the collection of investments that generate cash flow whether you're working or not. What are these assets? They include businesses that don't require your daily presence, you own them, but others manage them. Stocks and mutual funds. Bonds. Income-producing real estate. Royalties from intellectual property like books or music. Anything else that grows in value or produces income and has a market. Kiyosaki's favorite asset class is real estate, but he advises others to find what they enjoy. If you don't like real estate, don't invest in it. Instead, focus on building your financial intelligence and find asset classes that align with your interests. Even while working for Xerox, Kiyosaki was focused on building his own business, his asset column. The more he learned about accounting, cash flow, and investing, the more he was able to grow that column. And eventually, that allowed him to leave the rat race altogether. He emphasizes that you don't need to start a company unless you truly want to. For many, the simpler and more effective path is to use your income from your job to buy assets, and let those assets generate the wealth that supports your long-term goals. Only after your asset-generated income grows should you indulge in luxuries, and only if your assets can afford them. In summary, financial literacy isn't just about numbers, it's about developing the mindset, discipline, and understanding necessary to make smart choices with your money. Focus on building your asset column, and wealth will follow.